Kia ora, everybody. I'm going to take you, those of us who were here in the last session in this room, heard me talk about our research data services journey and what we're doing there. And so I'm going to do a bit more of an in-depth dive into what we've been doing around thinking about a secure research environment. Again, I used Copilot to generate an image here. I asked it to do a series of painted houses, so terraced houses. Just keep that in mind as we're going through the talk, because I think personally, to me, it kind of embodies some of the ethos of what we're trying to do here. So, we have steps that go up to front doors, and we have houses. They're all painted slightly different colours, but at the same time, they're still houses. I won't go too much through our research data management journey. I think hopefully most of you have heard that, other than to say the thing that really kicked off what we're doing is the research data management stocktake that we did, and the 3 initiatives that got funded out of that, one of which was the secure research environment. Drivers. You've heard a lot about the drivers as we've been going through the sessions, both this afternoon and earlier. Really, it's about thinking about sensitive data in the landscape that we're dealing with now, the privacy and the increased requirements, the ethical legislative requirements, the ethical considerations, and the data security that is increasingly coming from funders and data providers. So really what we're looking to do is create those reproducible houses that are approved, that are conformant to standards that we can say, look, this is secure in these ways, and also make it faster to implement. So far, everything we've built has been very bespoke for where things have required sensitive considerations. So we're really working towards making that implementation faster, making it easier for researchers to get to, making it easier for them to put it in their research applications, into their ethics applications. But also, while enabling all of that, managing the risk around working with sensitive data, and enable people to come together in that sensitive, secure environment to work. So there's a very general example of what a secure research environment is. We've built what we've done around the 5 SAFEs frameworks. If you don't know what that is, come and talk to me afterwards. So we did a lot of work in the early sides of the process, thinking about what we're doing across those 5 SAFEs and the user requirements around that. So making sure we've got trained researchers who are accessing their data, it's safe data, via this kind of restricted desktop for a given amount of time for a specific project, and only data that's approved can come in or out. So our process. People who came to eResearch last year would have heard Bincy stand up and talk about what we've done in terms of the user requirements and the process that we've done so far. So I'm going to really focus more on the work that we've done in piloting the system and what we've done in that space, as opposed to the first couple of steps, which are really gathering information and doing some proof of concepts. So looking at what systems were out there and what worked with our co-design partners. So as part of the pilot, it was kind of 2 steps or two strands that we did. One side of it was doing a whole lot of workshops to work out, if we're going to put in a system, what's going to work for our researchers and the people around that in terms of what their compute requirements were, what sort of support and guidance they wanted, what does onboarding projects and users look like in a secure research environment, what would work for people? And then what sort of training needs, what are the expectations in this space? And we gained a lot of insight into researchers' thoughts and the needs, the types of compute requirements, and the types of projects that we were going to have within a secure research environment. And the outputs from those workshops also informed a much wider development of not just the onboarding material, overview of training, but some additional training we're looking at putting in. I won't go through this in great detail, but it's about thinking about the tiering of workshop, who was in the workshops, whether you have a whole project team together or you do it specifically as videos. And I will say, like everything when you ask researchers, different people wanted different things. So that's something you take out of this, is you need to provide different mechanisms to support different groups. People wanted guidance on sensitive data and best practices. So that's one of the things we're bringing in, and it is a larger piece of work that's alongside the secure research environment, is better guidance around working with sensitive data and some best practices in those spaces. And then thinking about role-based training. So I'll talk to the roles we have, but there are different roles within a secure research environment. So having some training that's bespoke for people who are maybe approving data in and data out, and who are the data custodians or managers. So as part of the pilot, we tested an onboarding process, and we got a lot of feedback. We had a request process, a little bit like many, I think, of us have in terms of people wanting resources. So we had a process where people came in and they had to go through an onboarding process. They had to request a secure research project. They had to have a consultation, because it's actually really important that we understand and they understand, and we have kind of an agreement and a relationship about what it is we're setting up. We also sent them a pre-pilot survey, and that was in two ways. So we wanted the participants to attend some training sessions, and we wanted to understand what their thoughts and what they knew and what their reported self-awareness was before going through the process, and then at the end of the process, how that had changed. And then also get some feedback on how the system worked for them as well. We also gave them, once we'd worked through that, they'd done a working with sensitive data workshop, we'd given them an introduction and a demonstration to the system. We then onboarded them. So we gave them with kind of an onboarding pack. So they had login, how to log in, some support materials. We developed a set of information they could access to help them use the environment. We asked the users then to undertake a series of tasks and then to give us feedback on those series of tasks in the system. And we provided templated feedback for those tasks to make it easier for the researchers. And then, like I said, we did that post-pilot feedback and we ran some interviews. Now, we actually did 2 pilots. So this is something I didn't tell you at the beginning. So when we went through the first set of processes, we were looking at what we could do in the cloud compute environment and what we do in an on-premises environment, because we were still working out exactly what might work for our researchers. And we staggered those pilot tests. So we did the cloud, AWS cloud environment first, and that was based on a thing called Treehouse, which is an AWS environment used in the UK, developed for researchers by researchers. And then we also did one that was based on Keypoint, which is run in Australia, but within the Nectar environment. So we took the premise of Keypoint, which is run in Nectar in Queensland, and brought it into our Nectar environment. This is the general high-level tasks that we asked everyone to do, and we asked what was the enablers, what were the barriers, and is there anything else you want to tell us? And then this is kind of what they told us in terms of their user experience. The overall thought pattern was the on-prem one worked for people, and we think there's a few reasons for that. The cloud is very new space for people. It's a step too far, I guess you could say, at the moment for a lot of researchers. The on-prem was a lot more familiar in terms of the experience for a lot of people. And in terms of knowledge growth, we had quite a distinct change in reported self-awareness around working with sensitive data. And I think this is, for me, one of the kind of heartwarming things of it, is people's awareness of what they needed to do from some very simple training of working with sensitive data was really valuable. And you can see, everything moved to to the right-hand side pretty much. So security practices, sovereignty obligations, governance, things about the policy, different frameworks, data management planning, statistical disclosure methods, working with personally identified data, ethics processes and requirements. So you can see they all shifted. And I think that's a really promising thing, if nothing else, to come out of this as part of the secure research work. So we did the pilot. People liked the on-prem. So we're now moving into an establishment phase, I guess you'd call it, of actually building the production system. And to come back to the slide that Sean showed, so this is our Nectar environment. When we did the pilot, we didn't build a complete secure region, so we did it within Nectar with not sensitive data. We said to everyone, this is a pilot. We don't want to put everyone's sensitive data in the pilot. So what we've got is a CapEx request to create this secure region within our Nectar environment. And so I'm going to just expand on the little dotted red line there to show you kind of what we've got. And we had a lot of discussion around what is the shared components versus what needed to be very specific for each project. And we sort of come up with, or where we're at the moment is a balance, we think. So we have some components that are control components for the secure research environment and some which are project-specific components. We have some services which are shared. So we have a guacamole interface that we're using. We're using an API for that, for the virtual desktop interface. We have licensing. Oh my gosh, that's an interesting one. I'm sure you all know. Thinking about logging, what logging do we need to do? So bring that all into the right environment. We use Rabbit message queues for internal messaging, having a database so we know who's linked into what projects, and also thinking of making sure we think about, what virus protection do we need to have on all of this. And then alongside that, we have an access portal. So the way in for all our researchers is through a very simple web interface. And the way for any data to come in or data to go out is also through those interfaces. And then we have projects which have specific storage with specific access rights depending on what your role is. We have virtual compute resources, and we have some special machines which are really designed for our data managers or our ingress, egress roles to actually help us bring data in and out and move that into a shared space. So we have researchers, which is our, I guess you could say, general population of people accessing projects who come in via an access portal. I've got this little picture in this middle there, little orange person. That's actually, I'll come to it in the next slide, that's a persona. So we have our users with roles, but they actually have personas when they get into the system. So we have researchers, we have approvers for ingressing data, approvers for egressing data, and they might not be the same person. So that's why we have two roles there. We have data managers, and they sort of have a wider control of the system. And then we have our administrators as well. So, personas. When people log into the portal, they're logging in through our university SSO. So they're logging in from an institutional login. If we really wanted, we can look at how we could expand that to Tuakiri, but at the moment, we're keeping it to institutional logins where you need VPN access. And so that's an institutional identity. Then what happens in the system end is it takes that identity and goes, okay, we know this person, and they've selected a specific project on the interface. So this is my project, and this is the role for that project. And that creates a persona in the system. And the persona, which is all of that information is held in a vault, that actually creates a password that's a password access for that persona at that time with that access. Because one of the big things we heard from our researchers is we hate logging into the system and then logging into the system and then logging into the system. So we worked really carefully with our security group around thinking about how can we have people log in once, still have multi-factor authentication, but then make it really simple for them to pick a role and not have to always re-authenticate. And so that persona is a really important part. So persona linked to a project, linked to a role for a particular user in the system. Does that all make sense to people? So only the access that they have to specific data and a specific compute is what they get when they're coming in using that persona. And that's a really important part of trying to make it secure, but also really easy for researchers to use. So some things to think about in terms of hurdles and enablers. It did take us a while to build the 2 pilot tests, so it took us longer to do the pilot than we thought. And we did have a few infrastructure delays, and we're still in the process of getting our CapEx through for this to build the next iteration. Licensing is complex, as I know you all know. So trying to work out how we could use university licenses, thinking about people bringing their own licenses, but in a nice walled-off garden is a journey in its own. And so having a limited set of standard components and licenses, and then working with research projects as we go to bring in new stuff is where we're at. As we looked at the cloud technologies, as a university, we really needed to think about OPEX-based, and this is true for storage actually as well, as we move forward into thinking about storage, moving from CapEx-based spending into OPEX-based spending, thinking about the cloud pilot was actually problematic, or there was a lot of discussion about it, should I say. And then actually we learned a lot from doing the 2 different pilots in the 2 environments. Doing a lot of co-design with our end users gave us a lot of insight. The fact that we increased awareness around managing sensitive research data as part of the pilot training and the onboarding was really good. And what I haven't mentioned is, as part of this, we looked across a few of the different standards. So we are a NIST shop. So we're working towards conformance with the NIST standards for our sensitive research data. We're also looking at SATA, the Standard Architectural for Trusted Research Environments, which is a big piece of work that's going on in the UK around people being able to create these sorts of environments but have ways to describe and use the standardized architectures. So that's, I think, a really big enabler is going through that, understanding it, and also understanding that that's a journey. You don't have to get everything perfect from the start. So that's what we've been doing, and that's where we're at. So I hope you enjoyed and learned something from this.
Great. Join me in thanking Yvette for that presentation.
Sure.
Any questions before she sits down? Oh, yep.
The ingress and egress applications are going to need to be very carefully controlled. What was the sort of balance between, are there existing components that you can slot in that you can get from somewhere else, or do they have to be built in-house? And sort of how does the security limitation of that, because it's so crucial, fit against the sort of security versus usability spectrum?
So the way the ingress and egress, and we've had lots of discussion about, how many ways do you give people to ingress and egress? But so we're using TUSD, whether that's the kind of mechanism that we're exploring for uploading the ingress, which is a really nice resumable upload. So it's through an HTML interface. So someone submits. So as a researcher, you go in, say, I want to submit this. We already know who you are because you've got your project and everything. You've logged in. And then that goes into a special area. So it gets virus scanned. Is this okay? And it gets checked by an ingress approver. So it has to go through that moderation process. And then once it's been through that process, the approver can then put it into the right place. So it's like, yes, this can go in here. And there's, this is happening. We'll send you an email so you know it's been submitted. And the same sort of process in terms of an egress, someone has to request an egress to happen, and then it gets moderated by a person. So as part of that access portal, there's a portion that is around egress and ingress requests.
Great. Any other questions? Yeah.
feel like I could just talk across. When it came to like the physical infrastructure, it's completely separate from your existing compute environment. How did you go about sizing for this? And is it a complete, all the functionality of the main environment is available just in a smaller version? Is it like a mini build?
It's, at the moment, it's a CapEx request for some servers. But what we're hoping to be able to do is, so we're starting small. We don't have like a lot of GPU access, for example. So what we found in the pilot is most of our users are at a smaller end in terms of the size of the data they're using. And then we have a selection of users, which are very important users who are higher demand. So we have to start somewhere, and what we're hoping is to add to that system and explore ways where we can actually share stuff in terms of the compute resource as we go. So evolve what we're doing, but still keep it secure.
Great, thanks, Yvette.
Thank you. I should say this wasn't just me. There's a whole team of us working on this, which was at the beginning slide.